Hey, welcome to another episode of Cutter One. I am your host, Jay, just Jay, your resident troublemaker, your resident culture warrior. I hope you're all doing well, and I hope everybody had a great weekend. And I hope you're all making the adjustment to daylight savings time if it's applicable to you. I know I hate this crap, but hey, what are you gonna do, right? Anyway, let's get right into it. This is more of a let's look at an article that we're probably I don't know. Well, let's look at the article and we'll see what we think of it. All right. This article is coming to us from The Escapist, and it says the Rings of Power give Sauron flesh, depth, and soul. Flesh, depth, and soul for Sauron. All right, let's see what they got here. Let me adjust this over here. All right, it says, in all the work we have seen from Peter Jackson and other creatives regarding the character of Sauron, the most infamous evil within Middle-earth and beyond, he is simply a force. The ever-watchful eye casts an eternal shadow over Mordor. With, with the Rings of Power, though, we are given a story to go with the Lord of Mordor. Mordor. I got to roll the R's. Sauron is fleshed out, given a personality, flaws, and motivations, and it is this that has further enamored me to the fallen angel of the Maiar. All right. The Rings of Power shows us the purity of Sauron, the purity of his darkness. His thoughts are so bent on what he believes in are so bent in what he believes in that his convictions appear absolute. Yet when Morgoth was defeated in the First Age, he was shaken to the core. Could he be wrong? Possibly for the first time in his existence, an existence that began before the breaking of the first silence, he is racked with self-doubt. This is where Galadriel meets him in the Rings of Power. He is figuratively and literally cast adrift, lost among the flotsam and jetsam. He is searching for peace. Like all great villains, there is a sense of familiarity. I'm really screwing up the English tonight. Familiarity within his machinations. I could say machinations, but never mind. Maybe that is why he is so terrifying, because this god has an all too human flaw: desires. Perhaps the most fascinating element of Charlie Vicker's portrayal of Sauron is that he is simultaneously recognizable yet mysterious. What is chance and what is fate? What is his doing and what did he allow to happen? Is his regret genuine or another trick? He openly apologizes to Galadriel for the death of her brother. It is a twofold apology that on second viewing has so much more meaning. Was it sincere, though? Halbrand had us all believe it. In the books, it is clear that when Sauron came to the elves as Anatar, he seduced them with promises and gifts. With the creation of Halbrand, Sauron becomes more than a flaming eye to terrify his foes. He is given a voice to deceive and flesh to lay him low in the eyes of his new allies. Galadriel finds a kindred spirit with which to battle against their common foes. He helps Celebrimbor solve the unsolvable puzzle, and with his pouch, Halbrand becomes a beacon of hope for the Southlanders. Within the 8 episodes of the first season of The Rings of Power, Sauron manipulates all those around him without even telling a lie. He becomes the Lord of Gifts in all but name. Then comes his first victory on screen, his battle against the forces of Adar. When he fights with Galadriel and the men of Numenor against the Uruk and his children, they conquer a force that tried to bring darkness back to Middle-earth. This is the turning point for Halbrand. He has vanquished a foe, redeemed himself after his great failure during the War of Wrath. It is here he finds purpose again, and he hungers for it. He wishes to keep it with his whole being. If I could just hold on to that feeling, keep it with me always, bind it to my very being. Then Mount Doom is born, and with it Halbrand is lost. Thought dead along with countless others, I believe Halbrand did die that day and Sauron returned. He was given new purpose from his victory by the people of the Southland cheering for the return of the rightful king of the realm, and by the opportunity given to him when Galadriel said she would bring him to Eregion to heal. From there, he learns swiftly, finally understanding that he can use the pride of the elves to bring himself unchallenged power. However, he does something that I don't believe the original telling of Sauron would ever have thought to do. He wishes to share his power with Galadriel. You could look at this as Sauron being quite a pathetic individual. He needs someone to bind himself to. First there was Morgoth, and now Galadriel. He himself is not strong enough to carry the weight of the crown he covets. Galadriel, after all, would bind him to the light, and he would bind her to power. It is a perfect partnership, and on the surface all is well, except underneath it is a current of tyranny and that not even his powers of deception could hide. The symbolism of the raft scene perfectly showcases the duality of Sauron. He offers a gift in one hand while preparing to drown you with his other hand. It is the ambiguity combined with the fact that he has not outright lied to Galadriel that shows there is hope, perhaps a fool's hope, that Sauron has changed. Unfortunately, we know that he cannot change because when he is asked a simple question about the difference between saving Middle-earth and ruling it, he answers with a blunt, "I see no difference." Sauron is never outright described by J.R.R. Tolkien. Some of his letters described him briefly as a little larger than human stature, but not giant in the First Age when he joined Morgoth. With the Rings of Power, Sauron has been fully fleshed out as a character. Now I'm invested in him because I am both fascinated and terrified of what part of the journey we will see next. All right, so let's get into this one. Okay, there's a lot to unpack here. There's a lot to unpack here. And by a lot to unpack here, I mean these are the articles, and some people ask, all right, Jay, you started this channel, you focus a lot on Tolkien and Lord of the Rings in relation to the Rings of Power stuff. And part of the reason why I do that is because not everybody is familiar with Tolkien's work. Not, the majority of people know Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. The majority know Lord of the Rings. Some know The Hobbit, mainly from the movie. But very few people, with the exception of like really true hardcore Tolkien fans, know the Silmarillion, Unfinished Tales, et cetera, Fall of Numenor, and the other books in the Legendarium. So one of the things I like to do, and I'm hoping that you guys would like that I continue to do with this channel, is when I see these sort of articles that come out, and they sort of take a position where it's like you can clearly tell that either the person just sort of Googled a little bit about the subject that they're talking about, in this particular case, Sauron, or they have a passing knowledge but not really an in-depth knowledge. And so a lot of what they say makes sense only insofar as if you don't know what Tolkien, the complete picture that Tolkien had painted regarding this particular thing. And in Sauron, this is the case. This author talks about, that Halbrand and the show sort of give flesh and depth and soul to Sauron. But I would argue that if you read Silmarillion and other works by Tolkien, a lot of that is already done. And that's one of the problems that a lot of people have with the whole Halbrand is Sauron thing. First of all, there are stories where Sauron is actually physically in the flesh. He is described physically in the flesh. And not only that, he's described as not only physically in the flesh, but also he transforms into a werewolf. And if anybody is familiar with the stories of Beren and Luthien, you know what I'm talking about. So the Halbrand thing doesn't make a whole lot of sense. And in terms of the motivations, and they act like he has these motivations, like he's, I was following the bad guy and the bad guy lost, and so now I'm kind of lost. And then apparently a volcano inspired him to be evil again, according to this article, which just isn't true. It just isn't true. Sauron's whole thing, okay, for those who know the lore, okay, Morgoth's thing, or Melkor's thing, was he wanted to create, okay? He ultimately wanted the flame imperishable. He wanted that ability that only Eru Ilúvatar had, which was to create life, okay? And Melkor / Morgoth, that was his whole motivation. Right from the get-go, before there was a Middle-earth, before there was Arda, okay, before there were elves, Melkor was already challenging Iluvatar. Even when they were in the Ainulindale, when they're singing the universe into existence, he is singing discordant tones, okay, as a challenge to Iluvatar. And that was his thing. His thing was he wanted the power, okay? Sauron was one of his lieutenants, okay, from very or early on, okay, was one of his lieutenants. Sauron's motivations were slightly different. Sauron's motivations were Sauron believed that he could save Middle-earth from the damage that had been done in the War of Wrath. Okay? He believed that he could save Middle-earth and fix Middle-earth, okay? Through his leadership, through his dominion, through his domination of basically everybody, okay? So his motivation wasn't, I want the power per se. His motivation was, okay, we saw this God level battle, that sort of laid waste to hundreds of thousands and vast swaths of the land and stuff like that. It sinks Beleriand, well, most of it. And his whole thing is, well, we can fix this. The only thing is everybody sort of got to get behind me and do what I say. But we could fix this. Or I could fix this. Y'all just need to get on board with the whole Sauron is the ruler. And that's his ultimate motivation. Okay. He's given flesh throughout the writings of Tolkien. He literally gets chained and brought back to Numenor from Mordor. He literally surrenders himself to the Numenorians. Okay, now he's got his reasons for doing that, but it's a flesh and blood Sauron that they bring back to Numenor, and that eventually whispers in the ears of the Numenorian rulers. So this concept of, well, the show is finally giving him, motivations and giving him a flesh and soul, and it's like, no, that stuff is there. If you read beyond the Lord of the Rings and the Hobbit, that stuff is there in Tolkien's writings. Okay, multiple times. So this idea that the show is somehow giving us this new and improved Sauron sort of boggles my mind, to be honest with you, because that's not the case. Like I said, it's interesting because the more interesting stories about Sauron, like I said, when he has that the island of werewolves, what do they call that? I believe it's Minas Tirith, but not the one we know later on. I think of maybe not Minas Tirith. I forget the name of the island, but it basically is the island of werewolves, and that's where Sauron, he's put in charge of that, and he can shapeshift. Okay, and there's a really cool, the only vampire ever in Middle Earth. There was one, okay, and she interacts with Sauron. Okay, so he's very much flesh and blood and has a soul. Okay, and he very much has his motivations. It's very clearly laid out and defined. Okay, he's not just a thing. Now, in the Third Age, he's a thing because ultimately, when Numenor gets destroyed, Sauron gets offed in the process, you could say, in the physical form, because he can't just regenerate and pop a new body back up and that's the end of it. Apparently, he has to build up his power again to do that. So, yeah, that's where I think this article gets it wrong. But let me know what you guys think down in the comments section below. Remember, if you like the video, please drop a like. If you feel like sharing it, go right ahead. But most importantly, please subscribe, because we're trying to get the numbers up. I'm trying to do the thing to make the thing and other thing. I don't know. I'm having issues with English tonight. So anyway, let me know what you think down in the comments below. Until the next time, I will see you then. Peace.